So I was having a conversation this morning that made me blatantly aware that some people want to jump to having a business over understanding the nuances of the careers or professions that they are encountering. And I love that idea. Yes, financially, I love that idea because essentially being financially insolvent is difficult. However, what I have learned, damn it, my fan's out of battery. Um, what I have learned from jumping the gun, even like I'm going to use this as an example. I got my certification and worked in a tax office for many years before I ever studied taxes in general. And in college, I saw that there was a lot of missing information from my certification versus what I was learning trying to get my BA to become a CPA because I wanted to learn tax law. Now, the nuances of these laws I discussed with this person and how the hypocritical system, and yeah, even he says that, it's not worth it for these smaller cases to even take these cases on because it's too much work for either nothing to a little bit of pay. However, that difference between having the certification and getting your CPA license, which is also another certification. So you can get your CPA license without going through the schooling, which is something that I considered and went against that consideration because I wanted to know the laws and I learned to practice them. I remember representing clients a lot for credits and stuff like that, especially when wives or husbands were taking their legal credits or when they reported or did, and so on and so forth, right? Mostly as translation services so that I could learn as much as possible. And from that, I learned that that wasn't the job for me, especially when the stress started to trigger such bad migraines from being on the computer. I realized that profession wasn't for me. The amount of stress that career takes is so bad on the body that it deteriorates the body. The stress that it requires from January to April is too much for the body. And the fact is that the majority of the types of clients that our business had are the types of clients that will add on to that stress with entitlement and misbehavior, and even with your own family expecting you to run a business the way they've run it, even if the way that they have run it is more stressful because it's not being run in an efficient way. And that's not the only business I ever started. I opened salons with my sister and realized if she wasn't willing to cooperate in doing the accounting and the what is it called, inventory and everything, I was always going to be carrying the heavy end and I would never get to do the creative fun stuff. And then eventually I couldn't stand because my legs were too swollen when I was on chemotherapy. And I realized this is also not the profession for me. As a caregiver, I love that profession. But again, not going to school made me make a lot of mistakes as a caregiver. I learned on the go, which is not what nurses get to do. And it's definitely not what CNAs do unless those CNAs or nurses began as caregivers, which is something many of them do while they are in college to be able to learn all of these things and learn about these conditions before they become nurses or CNAs or physician's assistants or whatever it is that they choose in their careers. So I do understand the nuances around certification versus academia, like getting your AA or your bachelor's. The business model that I'm thinking about now, yeah, I could totally turn it into a business model, even though right now I want it to be a therapeutic model. The reason I want to go back to college and see if my credits transfer is because I want to learn as much as I can of business and psychology so that I can run my business in a more efficient way that is more congruent to my health conditions. I can't do that if I'm skipping steps. Yes, I can probably pass the majority of certification programs just by taking the test. I've proven that in the past. I can understand these concepts well enough to do that. Some of it is very, common sense. Would this be harmful to the human body or not? But that wouldn't teach me to catch the red flags. It wouldn't teach me to understand when someone is trying to manipulate the system or do something illegally, or in the business plan that I'm thinking about is more revolving around my already acquired coaching certification and also my acquired experience as a caregiver. The thing is that to be able to specialize in any of what I do, I would have to learn more about those conditions. And yes, I can do that on my own. But then I'm just using myself as a whiteboard. I'm not asking anybody to expand on the information I'm learning. It's just my understanding of that information. So meaning you don't have anyone questioning that information. It's why online learning is very difficult for me, because I need someone that I can debate these ideas with. Because the only way to fortify belief or faith is to get as much information and to question that information. And I get it. Right now, a lot of people were sold on this idea and then went bankrupt from all of this school debt, which I agree, it's some fucked up shit. Education should be free. Education should be free. I totally agree with that. Because if you don't make education free, then you have a lot of people learning these certifications. So now you have a plumber offering plumbing jobs when they don't have the experience or the understanding to understand why in a certain place you would have to install this sort of plumbing instead of that sort of plumbing, because in the long run, this is going to make it so that the insurance company does not cover future repairs or things like that. That's just an example, right? Because we've experienced things like this from those cheaper certified options, and they are legally certified. But if they make that mistake, you're the one covering it. And so a lot of these people will say, well, we have those bonds and everything. I always had a bond in every single one of my jobs that's supposed to cover any mistakes that I might make. However, where's the pre-accountability? Where's the responsibility? Because essentially when you're studying careers or educating yourself and stuff like that, where is your responsibility in that? Are you just being responsible for learning about the profession so you can make money? Or are you being responsible because you're going to hold yourself accountable if you're making decisions and making mistakes because you didn't educate yourself? Because this is where we're struggling, where a lot of, let's talk about patient doctor relationships. That's where a lot of the struggle is. You guys are doing things based on policy and information around insurance companies, which isn't always in the best interest of the patient or their maintenance care or access to the care that they need. Your profession is supposed to take care of the patient as a doctor, but you're managing bureaucracies instead of managing your patient care. When you're being rushed to get these patients faster out of your appointments because you're given X amount of time in between appointments, once again, you are putting aside patient care and proper patient, you actually getting to know your patients, especially if you're their PCP, because you're the one doctor they're going to see all the time. If you're rushing them out of those offices, then you're not doing what's best for your patient, and you'll never be able to advocate properly for your patient if you don't know the bureaucracy that you're working for. Because essentially, if you don't know the bureaucracy that you're working for, you're never going to put the notes properly into the system in a way where that said bureaucracy is going to protect and advocate for the patient in a way where their maintenance care isn't going to be delayed or denied or need prior authorization, despite the person being sick for as long as they've been with these conditions. Because, it gets harder and harder to get maintenance care paid for through Medicare and Medi-Cal. So those are just some examples of different professions that I have seen these issues arise. I love the fact that we're bringing certification programs back. It's why I was able to be employed right out of high school. I got to finish my cosmetology certification less than a month after my 18th birthday, and that's, that's great. But college is literally what teaches these kids to think differently. Not just to think for the money, which is what poverty teaches you. It's what parents from poverty teach you. They teach you to skip all the foundational steps and jump straight to professions, even though you do not understand the legal nuances around what you're doing. I remember a CPA telling me, hey, why are you worried about protecting yourself legally when I was starting my coaching business? Why are you worried about protecting yourself? Just start the business. Just do it. Because if I make a mistake and one of my coaching clients ends up, making a life-altering decision that puts them in the hospital or something like that, I'm responsible for that. No, you're not. You're not responsible. Just get them to sign this and that. Yes, you fucking are. As much as coaches want to sit here pretending like they're not liable the same way a therapist or a psychiatrist is, the only reason you're not is because there's no oversight. You know why there's no oversight around coaching and medicine circles yet? Because y'all haven't killed enough people for the federal government to say, hey, you know what? They're taking this too far. Now there needs to be oversight. Now we need a committee that licenses these people and has oversight around these people so that we can decide what they can offer to the general public, which is what you guys are doing to ancient medicine. You're destroying it. However, the good thing about that is that might actually lead to the legalization of things like psilocybin, peyote, marijuana federally recognized instead of just state recognized, and things like that. Just keep that in mind, that if you're fighting for that legalization of those medicines, you're also fighting for the regulation of those medicines and also the regulation around those who serve those medicines. We always want to jump the gun. And that's why I always tell you guys, or I try to always tell you guys, when you are trying to fortify your beliefs and even in business practices, you have to realize, am I doing more harm or good? Because essentially in the long run, if you're causing harm, eventually you're going to have to deal with the moral injuries and your own guilt and shame or whatever comes from the harm that you did if you didn't do the research to figure out what you could possibly harm. And then people say, well, yeah, but if you do that, then you never start a business. That's not necessarily true. It just means that you look for different avenues, that you look for different routes that are going to be less harmful. The point of having a conscious business is exactly that you're going to grow your business consciously without needing to harm the general public or another human being in order for your business to flourish. And a lot of these business models around coaching are harmful. They're harmful. And they try to keep revolving door clients, which is great if your clients are actually succeeding. But if you're keeping your clients in the hole with these manifestation mentalities, oh, you're just not doing the work right because you're not succeeding, and you're not taking real societal conditioning into account, the fact that if you're going from 0, you're not going to reach 100 right away. If you're trying to coach people out of poverty, you need to start with the foundational blocks of that poverty, which oftentimes is learning about business before you actually open a business. Everything that I've learned about business has been taught by a parent who never ran her business in a way that was congruent for business health or all of her employees' well-being. It's solely structured to help those who are willing to work the way that her business is run, even if that business is not run efficiently. So we have to keep that in mind. Yes, I would love to jump the gun because right now I am financially insolvent. But jumping straight into a certification program instead of going through that educational program that's also going to fortify my mental health and well-being while teaching me about business is going to break me in the long run. So I get all of these young people wanting to jump that gun, but that's also why we have a lot of businesses right now, including businesses for locksmiths and shit like that, that don't have fucking integrity. This is how we create corrupt people and corrupt systems. Now, I get it. I am all for self-policing if we are actually self-policing. But a lot of us, I've done it too, will have boyfriends or friends that we know are doing corrupt shit that's fucked up to their clients, but we don't let their clients know. We all know that one mechanic that's doing shit they shouldn't be doing to cars. But we'd have to put ourselves in danger. And that's where self-policing comes in. We either need to have those regulatory systems like police officers and those regulatory systems for business and business licensing and also business liability and accountability. Or we're back in the Wild West where anybody can sell anything as medicine, snake oil salesman, you know, and sell you shit as a saving pill. And no one gets to say anything because you bought it. Because you bought it. Y'all don't seem to see the convenience of liability laws versus not having them at all. There's a lot of Wild West and spiritual and holistic practices. And I totally advocate for the bridging of medicine, modern medicine and ancient medicine, so those regulations can transfer to public well-being. Because yes, giving people the wrong herbs can kill them. Yes, putting someone in the sauna when they have certain conditions can kill them. Yes, having someone in all-night ceremony while taking medicine and also having a heart condition can also kill them, and so on and so forth. These are all things and questions that don't always get asked in some of these circles. And when you have somebody who's that irresponsible serving medicine, I suggest that if you're going to participate as an onlooker and not as someone who ingests that medicine. Again, none of this is medical or professional advice. It's just a rumination that I'm going through right now, trying to decide whether I want to go back to school and get my bachelor's versus getting another certification. But to be perfectly honest, the way that I'm seeing how we're going to fall into another era of certifications without accountability, which will lead to a lot of fines and a lot of businesses closing down, which is greatly convenient for our systems because they'll make more money from those fines and so on and so forth, and from the lack of these certified programs not teaching people to have the proper bonds in order to make that level of mistakes. However, it's a rigged system either way. It's a rigged system either way. If you really want to go that way, education should be free. Not just certification programs that you try to rush kids through them. If they want to learn about ethics and law, it should be free. Not because they go to a library. Y'all should be paying professors what they deserve, but also giving access to all without needing to pay for that education. If the goal was the betterment of this country, you'd want everybody to be educated, properly educated. Because this is also the reason why they're easily manipulated by foreign entities. I know, I take it to extremes, but I just want to show what the extremes will become if we let the balance tip in any poor direction. And I'm all for these things happening because, again, financial insolvency, if you've always had medical debt since you were young, it's one of the hardest things to because you get to the point, it's not hopelessness. You get to the point where it's pointlessness. You just don't see the point in working so goddamn hard if all of your money is always going to medical care. It gets exhausting. And the thing is, not just to medical care here in the United States, because when they're ignoring me here, since childhood, my mom takes me to Mexico. And that's it. And that's what's been happening. That every time I get ignored here, even I have gone to Mexico to get testing and so on and so forth, and medical care in Mexico, because I was being ignored, having insurance here, having paid insurance. And that's what I'm saying, having that paid insurance. I've tried to raise awareness a lot around this, that it doesn't matter if you have Medicare, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, if you have all of them. They're still going to decide the timeline on your health. So if your health is preventing you from getting a job, it also prevents you from having that liberty or that freedom or independence to not be financially dependent on a system. Because that's also financial abuse, always being dependent on the system, never being able to move, never being able to be like the average person, be like, well, today I'm going to move to another state, because you understand that you're going to be without medical care for sometimes up to a year if you move out of state. I moved counties, and it still took more than 6 months of fighting for things to get moved. Moving from counties and then moving my insurance because Kaiser was being an idiot. It's not okay. They make it impossible for disabled people to have freedom, and then complain about us not wanting you to change the system we finally learned. Because every time you change the system, you don't make it easier for the disabled person. You make it harder. And it doesn't matter if you have all the exemptions. Having all those exemptions does not guarantee you housing, and it doesn't guarantee you that you're not going to be dehumanized by the system. Because the point of the dehumanization is to weed out fraud. Yeah, let's treat people less like humans, so that they hate the fucking government more. Because I guess we must hate the government that we have paid into, or be fighting it all the time. It doesn't make any sense. If you truly wanted a stable country and stable residents of said country, you would treat them differently. You would treat them with kindness. But it's easier to treat with kindness the foreigner, because if you treat the foreigner with kindness, they'll be grateful until they figure out that that kindness was distempered. The American dream. So I really do invite you guys to do more research. I'm still going to sit on it. I haven't decided yet. I don't know what's going to be best in this era, but I truly believe that it might be best for me to go back and learn more about business, especially with everything changing as much as it has. Because making it easier for people to get grants and start businesses doesn't guarantee that these people are going to have integrity. You're actually signing a lot of people up to do incorrect or illegal things because they didn't understand how these businesses actually work. And coaching is a big one that I think soon they're going to start regulating because of how much has happened. And I feel bad because I got further with my coaches than I ever did with any of my therapists. So that's why I hope that they involve real coaches, those who are willing to work within the system to bridge that gap, I hope that they start giving coaches the opportunity to be therapists, because in reality, coaches and therapists do a lot of the same things. A lot of the same things. The only difference is that the therapists learn a lot of what psychiatrists learn. But still, you would still need psychiatry to be able to diagnose and chemically treat. So if that is the case, you have the same luck with a coach as you do with a therapist. And I'm saying that from my experience with coaching and therapy. Even though I do have a good therapist now, I still moved better through my coaches than I ever did through the prior therapists that I had. So just keep that in mind, because you are creating the flaws in our medical system that are turning people away from the medical system. And coaches are creating the flaws in the holistic system that are going to create laws that are going to destroy the holistic system until you guys bridge the gap. And we already see that happening in some spaces. So think about what certification programs actually mean for long-term business plans. And if that's your goal, then please also look into fortifying your knowledge around business, and not just the basic that you need to know to be able to make money. The basic is not going to ensure that you don't break laws, and the basic is not going to ensure that you don't harm the general public. And the moment you harm the general public is the moment that you put all eyes on that profession. I love you and have a good day.